and welcome back to another episode of the Health Explained Show. I'm so excited today. We have Dr. Jennifer Roelands, and we're going to talk about some hormones and women's health. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Jen, for being with us today.
Thank you so much. What an honor.
First of all, I just want to get into how did you end up in the field that you're in?
In OB/GYN or integrative health?
You know what? Either one.
I actually was going to be an ER doctor. I got everything set up to be an ER doctor. I was ready to go. And at the last moment, my mom said to me, "You just talk nonstop about that OB rotation that you were on. Are you sure that you don't want to be an OB/GYN?" And I ultimately decided, actually working with women, I enjoy that. I enjoy the process of seeing people, when they're younger and then they age and you get to see them during their time of deliveries, which is a special moment. And you just kind of get to have these long-term relationships with women. And I just said, that's for me. I think that's where I should go. And so I ultimately ended up doing OB/GYN and becoming board certified and working in a traditional office for 13 years. And as I was kind of going through being a doctor, seeing patients, I started having my own health struggles. I actually had infertility and ultimately found out that I had hypothyroidism as causing my infertility. And I was realizing as I was going through this process that there's some things we just didn't learn in medical school. We didn't learn about nutrition and how that affects your health. We didn't learn about sleeping at night and how important it is to make sure you get adequate sleep to make sure your thyroid works. We just didn't really learn about these other pillars because there's so much to learn to begin with. And so I started diving into integrative medicine, which is really complementary and traditional medicine put together, and realizing that I could offer so much more to my patients and myself if I could actually just expand upon what I already knew. So I did a 2-year fellowship in integrative medicine at the Andrew Weil Center. And then I ultimately now decided to move that direction. And I am the CEO of my telehealth company, Well Woman MD. And I actually just provide that type of service every day.
Oh, I love that. That is such a great story. And you know what? It's so funny. I'm thinking the same thing. I liked OBGYN during my rotations and I kept going, oh, but the lifestyle. I was heavily looking at ER at one point. And it was funny because I had the department chairman at ER was like, I'll give you a spot for residency. He goes, but I know your heart is in OBGYN. So it was funny. That's how I ended up in OBGYN too. So when you're dealing with your patients and you have to explain hormones, hormones are people are like to blame everything on the hormones. Like, I'm having this symptom, it must be my hormones. So how do you explain hormones to patients?
Yeah, so I actually use this example, especially when we talk about female hormones, right? They are so interconnected with so many other hormones in our body, and it can get really, really complicated when you start saying, well, the fact that you have low progesterone makes you have cravings and you're eating more and you're having difficulty losing weight. It's hard to interconnect these things. If you were to show, if we pulled out our old organic chemistry books, we're going to scare patients because it's super, super complicated. So I kind of describe to patients, I use this 3-sister analogy and say, estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol are very much like 3 sisters in the same house. And estrogen is the dominant sister. She's the older sister. She's the one that sets the examples for the other 2, right? She's the one that kind of has her stuff in order. She's in charge of performance and staying on track and staying in charge. And usually she kind of sets the examples for the 2 younger sisters. But when estrogen is out of the way, when she is really not doing well and not functioning or having a bad hair day, like everybody in the household has a problem. She affects the other 2. And so I kind of describe that estrogen is so valuable because it affects every cell in our body. We need estrogen. And as we age, when we go through perimenopause and menopause, this is where we start seeing all these downhill effects and these downhill symptoms from women who are lacking estrogen. Progesterone's the middle sister. She kind of gets ignored a lot. She really does kind of get pushed to the side. People often give hormone replacement therapy with estrogen, but they forget about progesterone. She's kind of the middle one that basically is there, but she kind of has to push out in front of everybody. And she can be the one that's responsible for mood, like us, our moodiness, like how we feel when we're pregnant and we cry at the Bank of America commercial and everybody else is like, it's Bank of America. And you're like, yeah, but there was like a kid and a dog, and it reminded my grandpa when he gave me candy. Like, that's progesterone. That's the middle sister that's often kind of in the background, but definitely can just throw things off. And then cortisol is the little sister. She tends to follow the other two. But she also walks to her own beat. Like the little sister gets in trouble. She basically does her own thing. And for the most part, she tries to follow the older sisters because she really looks up to them and wants to sort of be a part of that mix. But when the little sister is mad, the little sister will take everybody out in the household, and she will take over the two older ones. So I kind of try to use that analogy to try to help patients understand that, like, it's not one thing or the other. It's not like we can say your estrogen is perfect, your progesterone is terrible, your cortisol is okay, and it's just this that's going to happen for the next 6 months. It's so intertwined, and they change all the time, just like the family dynamics. One day someone's having a good hair day, and the next day they're not having a good hair day. And so we have to kind of constantly be monitoring those and paying attention to the symptoms and try to figure out what is actually changing in our body.
I was thinking about that middle sister with progesterone, and in traditional medicine, especially, we completely forget about progesterone because we've been taught in traditional medicine, like, oh, you know what? If you don't have a uterus, you don't need the progesterone anymore. Like you said too, when we're focusing on women with who've gone through perimenopause and menopause, it's like, well, all right, let's give you some of that older sister. But the only time we like think about that middle sister is like, oh, we've been taught like if you have a uterus, we needed to protect it. But that's, how would you say that women, even without a uterus, need that progesterone?
Yeah, so I literally bring up the chart and show them how estrogen and progesterone start to decline through perimenopause and menopause. And so just physiologically, you need to restore those. If you're going to restore one, why not restore both? I don't think that medicine should be made just upon a clinical trial, right? Okay, if you don't take progesterone and you have a uterus, you may have a higher rate of hyperplasia of the uterus or cancer. That's not a reason to say everybody should be in that box. Like, the reasons can be that people feel better, that if you give someone progesterone, then they're going to sleep better. They're going to get to sleep better. They're going to stay asleep better. They're going to be calmer. Their brain's going to be calmer. So they have less anxiety. They have less heart palpitations, which can be a very progesterone dominant symptom from GABA receptors in the heart. So I really, we can't just make our decisions as doctors to say, well, we're only going to give you progesterone because it protects the uterus. Like, that's not enough of a reason. It needs to be about, how does someone feel? The whole reason why someone takes hormone replacement therapy to begin with is because they want to feel the way they did. They don't want to feel the way they are. They want to feel the way they did. So if you're going to do that and really restore those hormones, you really want to do it to where you're making someone who's 55, 35, feel 35. And when you're 35, you have estrogen, progesterone, both.
And then, I like this because I love the imagery behind this because as people explain the different fun ways that they explain different medical conditions, I love this with hormones because then I was starting to think like, oh, so when we're stressed, our cortisol goes up. And it's kind of like if you have a little sister and she's throwing a temper tantrum, who's the parents paying attention to? They're not paying attention to that older sister anymore, right? Everybody's paying attention to the one that's throwing the temper tantrum on the floor.
Yeah. And usually the older sister, the youngest sister knows how to get the attention, right? She's learned, she's the one that typically is like, I know what I can do to irritate the other guys to get where I need to be. And that's very much what happens with cortisol. You can do all the things right. You can take estrogen, progesterone, hormone replacement therapy. But if you're basically like at the gym 4 hours a day eating lettuce because you're, trying to fit into whatever you think is healthy, your cortisol is going to go through the roof. And it doesn't matter what you did, it's going to be a mess. So I try to explain that is very, very important to still be a factor as to how do we keep our cortisol in check.
And then I was going to ask you, other than hormone replacement, what are ways that we can kind of keep the sisters all working in conjunction, everybody getting along?
Yeah, so the beauty of integrated medicine is there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, more than the traditional sending. So there's patients of mine who want to use traditional hormone replacement therapy. There are patients who want to use herbs or supplements and lifestyle changes. And there are the patients who are like, I just want to do it from a lifestyle standpoint. I want to make sure that I'm eating the right foods, eat the foods that love you back. The most important thing I could tell you about nutrition when you're 40 and up is like figure out the foods that love you back.
I like
Because
that
there's
one.
definitely a very personal specific nutrition plan. And I don't like when people say every 40-year-old needs to be on paleo, everybody needs to be on this. That's not true. Everybody's very different. So trying to find the right nutrition pattern, that an eating pattern that works for you, is really, really important. Some people can do intermittent fasting, some people cannot. Some people like meat, some people do not. Like some people find out their blood sugars go through the roof with sweet potatoes, some people do not. Like there's so much personalization. So it's really important to find the foods that work for you. It's important to have balance in exercise, because honestly, we have these concepts, and if you're 40 and up, you went through the era of like just work out harder. Like you just need to work out harder. You just need to push yourself harder, harder, harder if you want to lose weight. And you need to eat, low calorie, no fat bars or whatever, because that's kind of the era that we're also in. And that's not the right aspect. We can actually make things much, much worse by trying to push ourselves so severe. So trying to find the right balance of cardio and resistance training, super important. And then I cannot emphasize sleep enough. Like you can basically just try to make sure you get a decent night's sleep every night and your life will change.
Yeah, because once again, I'm thinking about what those sisters is like. How cranky do you feel when you don't have enough sleep? Like
Exactly.
that's your little baby sister throwing a temper tantrum.
Well, all the sisters, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any of them that say they're going to stay up a little too late and watch Netflix, it never goes well. Everybody needs to get a good night's sleep and making sure that they're taking care of themselves.
I this is like it's you got my brain spinning too with this analogy. And I'm starting to think, remember when we were training and that Women's Health Initiative study came out,
Yes.
and we now look back and we realize, well, maybe there was a lot of factors which why that wasn't a great study, but there's definitely differences in synthetic progesterones versus naturally occurring progesterones, and I wanted to have you explain that one to us.
Sure. I would say, that study has done a lot of damage over the 25 years since it happened. I literally remember like the Today Show. I remember them on the Today Show saying, no one should be on hormone replacement therapy. And I was in like college. I mean, it wasn't even on my radar, but I remember them saying no one should be on it. It's going to cause cancer. Everybody should be off of it. And literally every doctor took women off of HRT. And unfortunately, there was two really big repercussions. One, women didn't get treated, right? They were sort of told this is bad. The other things that stopped training doctors. So I remember, 15 years out, I remember distinctly my attending telling me in residency, you don't need to learn that estrogen progesterone dose stuff because you'll never need it. You'll never need it. So don't spend time trying to figure out what kind of hormones you should give women because you'll never need it. And that was my experience with hormone replacement therapy and menopause care in residency.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that sets up for how you practice, is that you're like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to prescribe. And unfortunately, now we have 20 years or 25 years later, we have this era of physicians who are not trained and women who are told it's bad for you. And we're the women that are taking it because we were in our 20s then, we were told it was bad for you. So you have this really bad misinformation of who is the right person to take it. So what I explained to patients for the WHI study is basically what they realized subsequently is a 50-year-old is very different than a 70-year-old starting hormone replacement therapy. So first of all, age matters. Second of all, the study really showed the estrogen only arm did not have an increase of breast cancer. In fact, there was 10-year data later that said it actually had maybe a protective effect of breast cancer.
Mm.
So protective or maybe even helpful, like decreasing your risk, is still being parsed out because every once in a while they do these subsets and then it kind of says, well, maybe it actually is better or maybe it's equal. But where the issue is the estrogen plus synthetic progestin arm there was a slight increased risk of breast cancer in that patient population. Now, I think it's like 1 in 1,000, like one person per 1,000 extra. It's still incredibly small. And they looked at the data when they actually diagnosed them. Was their prognosis different? Meaning, if you were on HRT and you were not on HRT, were you worse off? Did you get like, say, stage 3 cancer and your outcomes are going to be worse? And they didn't. Even though they were on HRT, ultimately their outcomes were not affected by it. So it kind of has changed the most of us who do a lot of menopause care sort of stay away from, for lack of a better word, like the synthetic progestins. There hasn't been a really good randomized control trial head to head against, let's put the synthetic progestins and bioidentical progesterone back to back. Like, let's put them against each other and see what's the breast cancer risk long term. Probably because pharmaceuticals tend to drive what trials we do. And so the makers of synthetic progestins have a little more money than the maker of prometrium. So it kind of works out that way. Unfortunately, that's sort of the nature of these things. But the word bioidentical progesterone just means that it's the type of progesterone that's identical to what's in your body. And you can get bioidentical that's actually prescription, and you can get bioidentical that's over the counter. It's more of a marketing term, really. But bioidentical really just means it mimics the exact type of progesterone that's in your body.
I'm going to steal your analogy for a minute. And I'm like, oh, how can I add to your analogy with this? And I'm thinking, like, what happens if we had a bratty little brother who put on a wig and a dress and it pretended to be that middle sister? It wouldn't be the same as that middle sister. So that's your synthetic progesterone, is this bratty little brother in the dress and the wig.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the other one, the testosterone factor. I sort of describe the testosterone actually as a step kid. And not that there's anything wrong with being a step kid, but we sort of always categorize as women, we're like, testosterone is a male hormone, right? Testosterone is a male thing. It's not like we call them male hormones. And it's like, actually, no, we actually have a lot of testosterone in our body as females. It's not really a male hormone. It's an androgen, but it's not a male hormone. And so that's why I sort of tell patients, like, we kind of sometimes consider this like the step kid. It's part of the family, but for some reason, they kind of sometimes are called the step kid, even though they aren't. And that person can have interplay. That kid can have interplay because they kind of come in and out of the system. Sometimes progesterone is working with you and you got great libido. Your performance at the gym is great. Things are kind of, you want to, everything around you, you feel like your focus is much better. And sometimes progesterone can really be putting a mess in the system, and things like PCOS, where you have high testosterone and causing issues with fertility and cycles and acne. And sometimes they can work together, and sometimes they can kind of be a deterrent from the family.
This has been so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain this to us. Where can people find out more information about you?
So I have a website, and my company is a telehealth company. I provide women's wellness services. And so my website is wellwomanmd.com. So it's WELLWOMANMD.com.
Oh, that is so great. So everybody, make sure you go check out Dr. Jen's website. Also, when you're done looking at her website, come back to WITV7.org and check out all the amazing program that we have. Don't forget to hit that donate button, because every dollar that you donate, even if it's just $1, makes a big difference. Our money goes towards our outreach programs, education programs, and bringing great programs and information like this today. And don't forget to like and follow WITV7, also myself on social media, and come back for another week of the Health Explained show. So once again, thank you, Dr. Jen, for being with us today.
The best things in life are the people we love, the places we've been, and the memories we've made along the way. Don't let your pelvic health get in the way of your life. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.